Lock the doors. Order.
The ayes to the right, 434. The noes to the left, 23.
Thank you. The ayes to the right, 434. The noes to the left, 23. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. And we now come to motion number 4. Minister, to move formally. The question is motion number 4 as on the order papers. May I say that opinion? Say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. Division, clear the lobby. The question is motion number 4 as on the order papers. May that opinion say aye? You have to shout aye. You have to shout aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Tell us for the ayes, Andrew Jenkins and Amanda Soloway. Tell us for the noes, Philip Hollowbone and Craig McKinley. Lock the doors. Thank you. Order. Order.
The ayes to the right, 431. The noes to the left, 36.
The ayes to the right, 431. The noes to the left, 36. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock. Thank you. We now come to the opposition day motion in the name of the Right Honourable Member for Ross Skye and Loch Harbour. Before the debate begins, I have to remind members that, as Erskine May says, good temper and moderation are the characteristics of parliamentary language. And parliamentary language is never more desirable than when a member is canvassing the opinions and conduct of their opponents in debate. The reason why this matters in this particular debate, which doesn't really occur in other debates, is that this debate is on a substantive motion directly relating to the conduct of the Right Honourable Member for Uxbridge and South Ruislip. So in this particular case, because it is a substantive motion of this kind, arguments intended to criticise or defend that conduct are in order. Therefore, things may be said which the chair would not normally permit in other proceedings. However, those speaking in favour of the motion should set out their arguments clearly. Intemperate abuse is as out of order on this motion as much as on any other. And I'm quite sure that the Right Honourable Member for Ross Skye and Loch Harbour will already have borne in mind all that I've just said. Call to open the debate, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you for the guidance that you've given to the House of the conduct of this debate. Before I begin, I'm sure you will want to join me, Madam Deputy Speaker, in wishing everyone a happy St Andrew's Day. Happy St Andrew's Day to you and all honourable and right honourable members. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Scottish National Party is bringing forward this motion of censure against this Prime Minister because we believe in a very basic principle and believe that the public does too. Those in power deserve to face consequences for their disastrous actions, and they need to be held to account. And the charge sheet against the Prime Minister is indeed damning. In the last few weeks alone, he ripped up anti-lobbying rules when one of his own was found guilty. He is attempting to restrict the right to judicial review, and he is seeking to undermine the independence of the Electoral Commission. But it didn't start there, and it definitely doesn't end there. Because since coming into office little over 2 years ago, the Prime Minister has been up to his neck in scandals involving cash for honours, cash for contracts, tax for tax breaks, and even cash for curtains. And as this motion states, this is a Prime Minister who is constantly breaking the sixth principle of public life. The duty, Madam Deputy Speaker, to be truthful. Madam Deputy Speaker, month after month, scandal after scandal, the charge sheet gets longer and longer, but not one single person is held to account. If the public is to have confidence in this place, then that needs to change, and it needs to change today. Because unless the Prime Minister faces consequences, unless he is censured, he won't just think that he's gotten away with the mess he's made over the last few months. You think he'll be able to do it over and over again. And let's be clear, if the Prime Minister isn't properly censured today, it will also be final proof that the Tories really do believe that it's one rule for them and one rule for everybody else. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would remind members opposite that we've all been witness to events over the last number of weeks. They might want to forget what has happened, but the public definitely haven't. The Tories marched through the lobbies, in due course, the Tories marched through the lobbies to undermine our parliamentary standards process, to tear up the rule books, all in order to protect the friend of the Prime Minister who was found to have broken the rules. This whole sorry episode showed Parliament at its very worst. And trust me, that's saying something. The Government Chief Whip and the Leader of the House are easy scapegoats. But we all know that this was orchestrated by a Prime Minister who thinks he's untouchable, who thinks that he can do as he pleases, a Prime Minister who thinks that he can change the rules at will, who believes that if the rules become inconvenient, they can simply be changed. So the question stands today, how much does it really take for Tory MPs to say enough is enough? Madam Deputy Speaker, it shows how far the standards have fallen, that the charges that I have made against the Prime Minister are not even in dispute. They're all matters of public record. The Prime Minister has even admitted in managing these scandals that he personally crashed the car into the ditch. It tells you all that you need to know, though, that he didn't even have the decency to admit this in the House of Commons. He only felt the need to admit his mistakes and apologies to the backbenchers of the Tory 1922 committee, and only because they were muttering about mutiny. I'm not sure that apology counts, as if he only did it to try and save his own skin. But no matter how much the Prime Minister tries to publicly wash his hands of responsibility for his actions, the public has already cast their verdict. The Tories may be sliding in the polls, but it's nothing compared to the hammering the Prime Minister is taking in the court of public opinion. In the last week, his approval ratings have hit an all-time low, and there's only one simple reason behind it. The public knows that the Prime Minister is at the rotten core of all these scandals. Madam Deputy Speaker, a natural comparison has been made with the major government in the early 1990s. But even that comparison fails to properly get to the scale of the corruption that has occurred, much of it in plain sight. But the difference between this Prime Minister and John Major was that Major took action to address the sleaze and the corruption. This Prime Minister is at the centre of the sleaze and the corruption. He is orchestrating much of it. And I'm afraid that corruption is the only proper word, the only honest word for what has been going on. As I said at the weekend, the Leader of the Opposition, and I do wonder where they are, is now often very fond of repeating the line that when it comes to the Prime Minister, the joke isn't funny anymore. But in truth, it was never funny. And we all now living with the consequences of having a man like this in Downing Street. Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's also important to reflect on just how damaging in recent weeks and months have been in terms of the public's faith in politics. Because each and every one of these scandals erodes standards, erodes trust, and ultimately erodes democracy itself. In the middle of the Owen Paterson scandal, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "I genuinely believe that the United Kingdom is not remotely a corrupt country, and I genuinely think that our institutions are not corrupt." Well, you know, the problem for the Prime Minister is that the public disagrees with him. A recent Savanta Comrades poll found that 54% of those asked thought that the UK government was corrupt. And if he wants to know why, the Prime Minister only has to look in the mirror. In the eyes of the public, this is a UK government that has normalised sleaze and is now trying to normalise corruption. This is the Tory government's attempt at a new normal, where no one is held responsible, no one is held to account, and no one ever, not ever, resigns. But that is exactly why consequences are so important, and it's why this censure motion matters. Because it can only ever become a new normal if we all put up with it. You know, this is a debate that matters to people in the United Kingdom. And we can hear the behaviour and the catcalling of the members opposite, and it sums up this attempt to shut down democracy, to shut down our right to raise these important matters in this House. But of course, that new normal is only become possible if we don't hold this government to account and we don't make them answer for their actions. So I would genuinely ask from members across the House, if they have any interest in maintaining some dignity and decency in public life, they should finally hold this Prime Minister to account and censure him for his abuse of power. Madam Deputy Speaker, let's take one example of that abuse of power. The Cash for Honours scandal. 15 of the Tory party's main treasurers, who happened to hand over £3 million to the party, were somehow, Madam Deputy Speaker, given life peerages to the House of Lords, as if by magic. 22 of the Tory party's top financial backers have all happened to have been given peerages since 2010. In total, this group have stuffed Tory party coffers with £54 million. And let's just look at one here. You know, this sums it up. The Conservatives see it as a virtue, that if you give multi-million pounds to the Conservative Party, then you end up in the House of Lords. My goodness, Madam Deputy Speaker, what price democracy? Let's take Lord Cruddas, a leading donor to the Vote Leave campaign, who bankrolled, let's not forget, bankrolled the Prime Minister's Conservative leadership bid. He personally gave up to £4 million in donations to the Tory party and affiliates. His reward? An ermine robe and a seat in the House of Lords. And what's worse, the Prime Minister personally overruled the House of Lords Appointments Committee, who advised against his appointment the very first time that the watchdog's recommendations have ever been ignored. 3 days after he was introduced to the House of Lords, what happened? Lord Cruddas handed £500,000 to Conservative Central Office. Now, I will gladly give way to anyone on the Tory benches who wants to stand up and justify that level of sleaze.
Order. I hesitate to interrupt the right honourable gentleman, but I just I hope that he will be very careful about precisely what he says about any member of the House of Lords, who is also, of course, a parliamentarian, any member of the House of Lords. And while it is, of course, in order for him to examine the conduct of the member who is the subject of this motion, that doesn't extend to other members of Parliament, which includes the Lords.
Deputy Speaker, but what I am reflecting on is the behaviour of the Prime Minister that puts members in the House of Lords when the House of Lords Appointments Committee has ruled against their appointment. And of course, I've given the opportunity for anyone on the Tory benches that wishes to rise and defend the actions of putting Tory donors £3 million for a peerage in the House of Lords. What a price to be able to undermine our democracy. I will happily give way.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way, and since none of the members opposite wish to intervene on him, I wonder if he might agree with me that is it not somewhat ironic that the members of the SNP on these benches demonstrate more probity and more respect for the rule of democracy than does the current Prime Minister? And is this not yet another compelling reason why Scotland should be an independent country, so that we can have a system of governance which is fair, democratic and transparent?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and of course he's absolutely correct. You know, we're speaking about the House of Lords. The House of Lords is the second largest parliamentary chamber in the world. The only chamber that's bigger is the Communist Congress. My goodness, what an advert for democracy. And the fact is that these unelected lords that have a say over our democracy, and the juxtaposition, the point that's made by my honourable friend is an important one. Because, of course, today we're discussing the behaviour of the Prime Minister and why he should be sanctioned. But in Scotland, just 7 months ago, the people of our country were given the right to have a say in their government. And crucially, they were given a right to have a say on the future of our country as an independent country, because the SNP made it very clear in that election that it was about a mandate for an independence referendum. And indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Conservatives made it clear that a vote for the Conservatives was a vote to stop Scottish independence. And what happened? You see, we're talking about democracy, and we're talking about respecting democracy. So let's tell the Conservatives a few harsh truths. Because in the 4 elections that we have fought to the Scottish Parliament that we have won, we've increased our vote at every election. We received just short of 48% of the popular vote in that last election. Madam Deputy Speaker, a higher share of the vote that any party has had in any election in the United Kingdom for the last 50 years. And if we're on the topic of respecting democracy, of respecting the people's sovereignty, then Boris Johnson must recognise that the Scottish Parliament, where there is a majority for Scottish independence, has the right to call that referendum.
Would the right honourable gentleman please refer to the Prime Minister as the Prime Minister and not by his name? If he could just re-say that last sentence, I'd be so pleased.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. But the point is, the Prime Minister has to respect democracy. He denies democracy when he stuffs the Lords with his Tory donor friends. But he must respect democracy when people in Scotland have voted for a Parliament that has a right to call a referendum, to take us out of this toxic union and find a way back in for us as an independent country in the European Union. I will give way.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. He understands that. I think that a debate tends to be a two-way thing and not just a diatribe delivered to the House. Could I suggest that if he wishes to restore confidence in this House, could I politely suggest that he maybe could have chosen a subject for debate today that was actually of relevance to the people of Scotland?
Absolutely right.
Global warming, education, health, where so many issues, not this rather lame subject, which I suspect is something of no consequence whatsoever to most people working very hard.
Really, Madam Deputy Speaker, what we're talking about is corruption and sleaze. We're talking about a Prime Minister that forces Conservative MPs to go through the lobbies to get one of their own off a charge against parliamentary standards. We're talking about a Prime Minister who rewards those that give money to the Tory party. I can say to the honourable gentleman that's exactly a subject which is of importance to the people of Scotland.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Not only is it an important subject, it's actually fundamental to our democracy and how Parliament works, to how the Prime Minister behaves. If we have a Prime Minister that comes to this House and fails to tell the truth, that is fundamental to how our democracy works in this country. So actually, it's more than important; it's fundamental.
I agree with my honourable friend, and the subject of truth and honesty I will come on to later on in my speech. But it's noticeable, Madam Deputy Speaker, that when the honourable lady who speaks with some authority on these matters is trying to speak, that once again the Conservatives try and shout us down. What a look this is to the people that are watching this debate. I'll give way one more time before I make progress.
He's incredibly kind in giving way, particularly on this, subject. I just wondered if you might take the opportunity to update us on the missing donations and the fraud investigation into the First Minister's husband, your party's chief executive.
Order. Don't shout at the right honourable gentleman. We all have to hear his answer, and while I'm on my feet, I'd be grateful if the honourable gentleman who's just intervened would in future use the word he, not you, when he's referring to the party opposite him. Mr. Blackford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, let me respectfully say to members opposite that all monies that are raised by the Scottish National Party for the purposes of fighting an independence campaign, I will give you a guarantee, I will give you a promise, I will give you a commitment right here and now, that every penny which is raised will be spent on independence campaigning, because that's what we are about. And there's a big difference. There's a big difference to those that fund the SNP and fund the independence campaign. Because I'll give you another promise. Not one single member of the SNP that gives us willingly will end up in the House of Commons. What they will be doing is they will be funding the SNP and the independence movement to make sure that we deliver on our promise of taking Scotland out of this union. Mr. Speaker, there's another important point to be made about how deeply damaging all of these scandals are. Every day that the Prime Minister spends concentrating on how he will somehow avoid scrutiny is a day not doing the basics of what his job demands. And it's also becoming clearer just how damaging and dangerous it is that a chaotic governance now defines Downing Street. That would be bad enough in normal times, but it's totally unforgivable in the middle of a pandemic. Because in the real world, away from the shambles in number 10, people are not only suffering from the pandemic, they are suffering from a Tory cost of living crisis. Inflation is running at 5%. Rising day-to-day costs and rising household bills is the main focus for families. And whilst all these political stories on sleaze have been going on and taking up time at Downing Street, the political decision to cut universal credit is hitting homes hardest. That shameful cut to universal credit wasn't just the wrong policy, it came at the worst possible time for families this winter. So we are left with a UK government not only up to its neck in sleaze, but hitting families at the same time. Madam Deputy Speaker, in Scotland, I am proud that we have a First Minister who understands the pressures that family finances are under, and a government that listens and responds. I am proud that at the very same time that the Westminster government is cutting universal credit by £20 a week, the Scottish National Party, Scottish Government, is raising the Scottish child payment by £20 a week. Madam Deputy Speaker, I think one of the public's real angers about these scandals is the deep dishonesty that has been so openly on display. The truth and the Prime Minister have always been strangers, and I say that in sadness and not in any anger. And let me just take a few examples. On the 4th of March 2020, the Prime Minister said, "We have restored the nursery's bursary." Completely and factually untrue. On the 17th of June 2020, the Prime Minister said that there were 400,000 fewer families living in poverty than there were in 2010. Both the Office of National Statistics and the Children's Commissioner have confirmed that that is false. On the 7th of November 2019, the Prime Minister told Northern Ireland businesses in person that the protocol would mean no forms, no checks, no barriers of any kind. Once again, completely untrue. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is right to be careful in terms of the language that we use in this House. But when it comes to language, it is also right to be accurate and honest. And on the basis of all the evidence, I can only conclude that the Prime Minister has repeatedly broken the 6th principle of public life. I can only conclude that the Prime Minister has demonstrated himself to be a liar. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me finish on this point. I think there is a misguided sense on the Tory benches that they have gotten past the scandals of the last few weeks. No way. The Prime Minister thinks that if he blunders on, people might not forgive, but they will forget. Not for the first time. The Tories are badly wrong and badly out of touch, because they just don't get the depth of anger amongst the public is very real and is not going away. I know that people in Scotland are looking on at a broken Westminster system that has never felt more remote, more arrogant and more corrupt.
Would my right honourable friend give way?
I will give way here and then.
I am very grateful. Everyone, does he appreciate, and do the members on the opposite side appreciate the damage that has been done when to be able to use the word liar in this place is now passed as fair comment and accepted, and the damage that is doing to our democracy?
Order, order, let us just be clear about that. It is preferable that such words should not be used in this place. But as I said before the Right Honourable Gentleman rose to his feet, this is a very specific and particular motion. And the Right Honourable Gentleman is examining the conduct of a member of this House, indeed the Prime Minister. Therefore, I cannot stop him from using the word that he has just used. I would prefer it if he put things in different terms, but I don't think that the Right Honourable Gentleman has strayed past the rules. I think he is perfectly in order, but it would be better if other members did not make comments such as those just made by the Honourable Lady, because what she said is not actually quite correct. But please, let us just keep it as moderate as possible. Mr. Blackford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I was dealing with the 6th principle in public life. And what I've done for the House is lay out 3 examples, and I could have given many more, where the Prime Minister hasn't told the truth. Now, I regret, in the context of where we are, that I had to make the point that I did, because it's important. Because if we undermine honesty and truth in this place, then what are we left with? And that is why we have brought the motion that we have tonight. And that's what I'm asking honourable members right across this House to reflect on. Because there is overwhelming evidence that the Prime Minister has broken that principle of public life. And I'm asking each and every member in this House, particularly on the government benches, to examine their conscience on the basis of the evidence and think very carefully before they go through the lobbies tonight. Because the public are angry at what has happened in this place. Public are angry that the member that I mentioned earlier, who had been sanctioned by the Standards Commission, that the Prime Minister sought to get off. And there will come a time where the public will judge this House. And this House tonight should reflect very, very carefully on that.
I thank the member for giving way, and I wholeheartedly agree that this is an issue about conduct, but this is also a question of leadership. We have a Prime Minister in the middle of a pandemic who has failed to learn. At the beginning of this crisis, he boasted about shaking hands with COVID patients. Now he's maskless in a hospital and too weak to tell members of his own party to put on a mask. What we desperately need is not just an improvement in conduct, but an improvement in clear communication and leadership from this Prime Minister.
I have to say I agree with the honourable member. And let me say, and look, perhaps maybe we should just calm down, because there will be opportunities for people to participate in the debate. But this issue of leadership and conduct is important, and it saddens me that when we're facing a new variant, and we don't know what the scale of that challenge will be, but the obvious thing for everybody to do is to seek to protect themselves, but more importantly, to protect others, to lead by example, to show leadership. And let me commend colleagues across the House that are sitting here wearing masks today. But my goodness, there are far too many that still don't get this, that still don't accept the responsibility that they have for each other. And they're even laughing about it, just as I say this. And this comes from the Prime Minister. But let me also say, because let me just carry on for a second, because this is important. The way that we conduct ourselves, the way that we interact with others, and I will commend the previous Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead, for the courtesies that she always showed to opposition parties, the protocols that were showed, the way that we had a relationship with Number 10. And it grieves me, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I can tell you that ourselves as the third party of this House, and I believe the Leader of the Opposition, has no relationship with Number 10. We're disrespected and disregarded by a Prime Minister that doesn't understand his obligations in public life, and that is yet another example. I will give way one last time and then I'll conclude.
Thank my right honourable friend for giving way. Isn't it telling about how complicit those benches opposite are, that when my honourable friend was reading out the list of untruths peddled by the Prime Minister, there was deathly silence. Exactly. The only time they were animated was when my right honourable friend called it for what it was.
I thank my honourable friend for that, and I would ask members opposite to reflect. Most people in this House are decent people. People come here in order to provide a public service, and I say to honourable and right honourable members opposite that they are being let down. We're being let down. These islands are being let down by a Prime Minister that quite simply doesn't know how to behave. And on that note, let's just say that it will be very interesting to see how the Scottish Tories vote tonight. And we will be watching. A group, of course, who never fail to see conspiracy at Holyrood, but somehow always fall deathly silent when it comes to sleaze and corruption overseen by their own Prime Minister. But in truth, this isn't about the Scottish Tories. I'll leave them to explain their own hypocrisy. It's about what the public expects when standards and rules are so clearly broken by their political representatives. They expect consequences and they expect this censure. But let's also be very clear about this. If we fail to censure this Prime Minister today, we have failed that public duty for accountability. And not only that, it will reveal something very telling. It will show a Westminster system that is broken beyond repair. It will show a Prime Minister who believes himself to be above the law of the land. The only comfort that I take is that fewer and fewer people in Scotland can possibly look at the broken, corrupt, self-serving Westminster system and conclude that it produces a secure basis for the future of Scotland. Because we all know that Scotland can do much better than this. We can do better than this broken Westminster system, and we can do better than this Prime Minister. We will do so much better when our country chooses independence. Madam Deputy Speaker, I propose the motion in the name of myself, right honourable and honourable colleagues.
The question is, as on the order paper. Michael Ellis.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to start by wishing the honourable members opposite, and indeed the whole House, a very happy St Andrew's Day. Always an auspicious occasion in the Scottish and British calendar. And I must confess, Madam Deputy Speaker, some surprise when the Right Honourable Member for Ross and Skye and Lochaber, with this rare opportunity to engage in serious debate with the government. I mean, I haven't been to a pantomime in quite some time, Madam Deputy Speaker, but instead he opts to launch pantomime season in the month of November, complete with an over-the-top characterisation of my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, who clearly he wishes would disappear in a puff of smoke. But the reality is, when it comes to fanciful fairy tales, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Scottish National Party are expert. And I venture that neither this House nor the people of this country will appreciate the over-the-top performance, nor recognise, I have to say, the absurd depiction of the Prime Minister, a hugely popular Prime Minister of this country, who returned this House with an 80-seat majority and is getting on with the job of building back better. And to take one element of today's rather long-winded and unfocused motion, improving standards in public life, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has made positive and constructive proposals on this topic, Madam Deputy Speaker, in a bid to find cross-party consensus and a way forward. And to take another point, the reform of the Electoral Commission. There is nothing in the government's plans to reform the regulation of the electoral system that will allow ministers or Parliament to interfere in the outcome of particular complaints or investigations. So in that regard, their motion is also in error. And there is a courtroom, in a moment, if I may, there is a courtroom tactic in some jurisdictions, Madam Deputy Speaker, not in this country, of course, which is known as throw enough mud and some of it might stick. Well, I think we know that when we see it. For my part, I think I'll give way more than her right honourable friend has done, but not just yet. For my part, I relish this opportunity, but to set a very different scene for this House. What my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, is achieving for the people who returned him to number 10, many of whom voted Conservative for the first time. And at the election, he made a clear commitment to spreading opportunity more fairly, uniting our country, higher skills, higher wages, higher productivity. That's the United Kingdom that my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, promised to create and is creating, and they know it. He got Brexit done. And since then, he has been using our freedoms outside of the European Union, and the catastrophists opposite don't want to accept this. But he has been using those freedoms, those hard-won freedoms outside the European Union, to serve the interests of the whole of this precious United Kingdom. I will in a moment, with policies that encourage innovation and growth throughout the whole of the United Kingdom and deliver for the whole United Kingdom. And I'll give way.
The Minister is making a good case. And does he find it strange indeed that the SNP posed tonight as defenders of democracy when they wouldn't accept the result of the Brexit referendum in the UK and they wouldn't accept the Scottish referendum on staying in the Union?
They are, Madam Deputy Speaker, fair weather friends to democracy. They support clearly only when it goes their way. The Prime Minister, Madam, Well, I'll give way, but perhaps he could say why it is that the SNP didn't choose to debate the vital topic of education in Scotland.
The Minister is speaking dutifully and gushingly about his Prime Minister. He's setting a picture which nobody in the country recognises. I wonder, for the sake of completeness, if he might like to explain, if things are going so swimmingly, why his colleagues on the back benches sent letters of no confidence to the 1922 committee.
Well, he disproves his own statement by the fact that, of course, this Prime Minister won an 80-seat majority, the biggest Conservative government majority since the early 1980s. So that is obviously disproven. The fact of the matter is that he, the Prime Minister, is taking care of the people's priorities, not focusing on the polemics of the party opposite. He's looking at what the people care about most. Keeping his... Well, I will give way, but perhaps you could answer why it is that the SNP haven't chosen to speak about health and the National Health Service in their precious parliamentary time.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. I'm not sure what he was asking me, because over the noise of his colleagues panicking, I couldn't actually hear him. But he may have been asking me why we weren't choosing to debate devolved topics in this chamber. And I think that somewhat answers itself. The Minister was speaking about what the people's priorities are, and I have to say to him that the people's priorities are not stuffing the House of Lords with unelected donors and cronies, but they are worrying how they're going to put food on the table because of the cuts his government is making to universal credit.
Well, this Prime Minister, of course, takes care of the people's priorities, looking after what they care about the most, keeping his promises to them, while I have to say the opposition plays political games, Madam Deputy Speaker, and not very good at them either. More nurses this government has created. More police officers this government is responsible for. More money for schools, more money for pupils in those schools, because people care about their health, they care about their safety, they care about their children's educations. And my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, is focused on improving our infrastructure too. He's boosting public services to get us on the road to recovery from the pandemic. And what does that look like, Madam Deputy Speaker? What exactly does that look like? It looks like this. It looks like £3.7 billion to build 40 new hospitals, 3/4 of them outside London and the South East. And it's 50,000 more nurses. It's 20,000 more police officers. It's a further £4.7 billion in the core school budget by 2024-25, meaning a total cash increase of £1,500 per pupil by that date compared to 2019-2020. So it is actually delivering. It's not the polemics of the party opposite, it's not the pantomime, it's delivering. It's not just talk, it's £36 billion package to reform the National Health Service and social care, tackling the issues that successive governments have ducked for decades. And thanks to my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, this government will deliver around £12 billion a year in extra funding for our health and social care services over the next 3 years. This is in addition to our historic 2018 settlement for the NHS, which will increase its budget by £33.9 billion a year by 2023-2024. It is, Madam Deputy Speaker, rolling out the fastest vaccination programme in Europe, allowing us to live with the COVID virus without significant restrictions on our freedoms. And I'll give way, and perhaps she can answer why she's not talking about matters that are more important to the people of this country.
Thank you, and I really do thank the Minister for giving way. Can the Minister confirm that he actually understands what devolution means and what matters are devolved to the Scottish Parliament and are debated there, and those matters that should be debated here, like the motion in front of him?
Well, this government has proven it knows what the people want of this country, and it does so by the 80-seat majority behind me. It's rolling out the fastest vaccination programme in Europe, allowing us to live with the COVID virus, allowing us without significant restrictions on our freedoms. Almost 9 in 10 people aged 12 and over, almost 9 in 10 have now received a first vaccine dose. That is a huge achievement, with 8 in 10 having also received a second dose. And the latest data shows that vaccines have saved almost 130,000 deaths and prevented over 260,000 hospitalizations. And what else? This Prime Minister has launched our plan for jobs, helping people to get back into work, earn more money, gain the skills our economy needs. This includes our £2 billion Kickstart scheme, which has already got 100,000 young people into work, our £2.9 billion Restart scheme, helping over 1 million long-term unemployed people find work, and our Lifetime Skills Guarantee, offering 11 million adults a free qualification. And it's cutting taxes. It's boosting wages. She should listen. The Honourable Lady should listen. The fact of the matter is, it's cutting taxes, it's boosting wages, it's helping working families.
Order. Order. Point of order, Mr. Owen Thompson.
Speaker, I'm just slightly confused here because I'm really struggling to find which points the Minister's making here are in any way relevant to the motion in front of us in the order paper today. Could you guide us?
No, would the honourable gentleman give me the second part of his point of order again?
Struggling to understand what points the Minister's making are in any way relevant to the motion on the order paper today, and would seek your guidance as to how we could actually focus on those issues.
No, I see what the honourable gentleman is saying, but I have absolutely no responsibility whatsoever for the content of the minister's speech. The minister is constructing his argument, and I'm sure that he will come to his razor sharp points very soon. Minister.
Oh yes, Madam Deputy Speaker, because of course the motion that they put is about the conduct of my right honourable friend the Prime Minister, and I'm telling the House, I'm telling the party opposite what the Prime Minister has achieved, his conduct. And it is, Mr. Speaker, let's look at the infrastructure uplifts. £600 billion into transport and broadband upgrades, including £96 billion for the railways, the biggest investment in our rail network for a century. That's one of the multitude of things that this Prime Minister has delivered to reliable, faster railway journeys across the North and the Midlands. And thanks to the integrated rail plan, we will build 3 new high-speed rail lines, electrify or upgrade 3 existing main lines, improve local services, and integrate them properly with HS2 and the Northern Powerhouse Rail, all bringing benefits to passengers 10 to 15 years sooner than under previous plans. And my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, is investing in our local streets so that we can all feel proud of where we live. And again, let me remind right honourable and honourable members of where the money is going. £4.8 billion via the Levelling Up Fund to help regenerate town centres and high streets, upgrade local transport and invest in cultural and heritage assets. £2.4 billion for 101 towns deals investing in local economies. And I gave away last time and it really wasn't worth it. And the £150 million Community Ownership Fund to protect valued community assets. Mr. Speaker, in getting Brexit done, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, and my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, have turned their attention to immigration. And the Nationality and Borders Bill will break the cruel business model where criminal gangs exploit. I'll give way to the right honourable.
I'm grateful to the Minister, and I have to say, he knows I have some affection for him, and he's doing a marvellous job at deflection. And it's noticeable, Madam Deputy Speaker, that there's no attempt to defend the behaviour of the Prime Minister, because quite simply, there isn't one.
Well, the feeling is mutual, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I am defending the behaviour of the Prime Minister, the conduct of the Prime Minister, and it is this achievement, it is this large litany of achievement that he knows he has no answer for. In getting Brexit done, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, and have... Yes, I'll give way.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way, and he accuses members on this side of the House of not having an answer. Well, it's very interesting that the Minister's got to his feet and he's going through the Conservatives' programme for government. He's going through the Conservative manifesto and he's making some fairly ambitious claims about what's been achieved. We're not debating that. We're debating the character of the Prime Minister. Could he focus his remarks on that, please?
The conduct of the Prime Minister is the subject of the debate. The conduct of the Prime Minister is the maintenance of this government and the running of this government, and that's what he's been achieving. And we've seen, going back to the point on immigration, we've seen the tragic consequences in the recent incident off Calais, and our thoughts are with, of course, the families and loved ones.
Order. Just for the sake of clarity, we're not debating the character of the Prime Minister. We're debating the conduct of the Prime Minister. That is the subject of the motion. Minister.
Yes, exactly, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you. And the principle behind the bill is that access to the UK's asylum system should be based on need, not on the ability to pay people smugglers to leave safe countries like France and Belgium. These are the things that are being delivered, and we've always been clear of the need to do everything we can, of course, to prevent people risking their lives and embarking on these perilous attempts to cross the sea. Now, our United Kingdom, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the most successful political and economic union the world has ever seen. The foundation of it, it's the foundation of all our businesses, and our citizens are able to thrive because of it. Since 1707, this government is committed to protecting and promoting its combined strengths based on those hundreds of years of partnership and shared history. And I'd like to remind the benches opposite that this government is committed to investing and levelling up across Scotland. And I'll give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. He's giving lots of examples of where the conduct of the Prime Minister is helping the lives of the British people. One such recent example affecting Scotland in particular was the COP26 summit held in Glasgow in Scotland. Does my honourable friend agree with me that this is one such example of where the Prime Minister is putting the priorities of the people first, and why this debate is a missed opportunity for the Scottish National Party to have today discussed what matters to the people of Scotland?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. It is yet another missed opportunity by the Scottish National Party. And I'd like to remind the benches opposite that this government is committed to investing and levelling up across Scotland. We are delivering, after all, an average funding boost of £4.6 billion a year through the Barnett formula over the spending review period. And this will enable investment in transport, schools, housing, health and social care. And this takes the total funding Scotland receives in Barnett-based funding to £41 billion per year. That is an increase of 2.4%. To spend on public services, Madam Deputy Speaker, boost growth and support families with the cost of living. In fact, current public spending per person in Scotland is £1,828 higher than the UK average, while revenue per person is £382 lower. Well, that means that I'll give way, although I'll have to make progress.
I thank my right honourable friend. One thing he's failed to mention, I'm sure he'd want to take the opportunity to celebrate, of course, is the government's Borderlands deal, which sees people from Scotland and the true north, Carlisle and Cumbria and Northumberland, coming together to invest together across the borders in their community. And as the Minister who had the privilege of negotiating that deal, I was refreshed that, in fact, the border is of no relevance to many people because they have friends and family and businesses that cross it. And they celebrated with this government and the devolved administration in Scotland that partnership along the borders that strengthens not just our United Kingdom, but England and Scotland as well.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and of course, and he speaks with the authority of an expert on the subject, and the expertise shows. And what it means, the numbers that I've been quoting, is that every person in Scotland benefits from over £2,000 in extra spending than the UK average. And I'd like to remind my right honourable friend that we have confirmed that we will be providing over £170 million through the Levelling Up Fund for 8 Scottish projects, including the new futuristic aerial roundabout in Falkirk and the redevelopment of Inverness Castle. And not to mention the £1.5 billion of funding for 12 city and growth deals. They don't talk about that, Madam Deputy Speaker, including over £500 million for Glasgow, backing a deal worth around £1.2 billion, one of the largest in the kingdom, and set to deliver 29,000 jobs over its lifetime. This government has been levelling up every part of the country since the day we took office. Indeed, the pandemic has shown clearly that we are at our strongest when we work together towards a common goal. Through both the furlough scheme and the self-employment income support scheme, we protected over 14.5 million jobs and livelihoods across the United Kingdom. And thanks to the Prime Minister, almost 1.1 million Scottish jobs were protected through the peak of the pandemic, supporting livelihoods across Scotland. The UK government has supported nearly 100,000 businesses in Scotland, but they don't talk about the businesses. Over £4 billion in loans through the Bounce Back Loan Scheme and the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. And it goes without saying, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the UK government has secured access to the COVID-19 vaccine for Scotland, saving lives and stopping the spread of the virus. So in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, we continue to make sure that we will use the broad shoulders of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland as a platform to unleash and deliver opportunity across the whole of our precious United Kingdom.
Now, before I call the Honourable Lady for the opposition, it might be helpful for colleagues to know that there will be a time limit of 4 minutes on backbench speeches. Annalise Dodds.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and a very happy St Andrew's Day to all in the Chamber. Now, I take no particular pleasure in debating this motion, but it is, of course, a pleasure to follow on after the Minister and indeed the member for Ross, Skye and Lochaber who opened today's debate. I have to say, I do find it strange to see massed ranks of Conservatives in the Chamber for this debate when they appear desperate to flee the Chamber no less than 2 weeks ago for the debate on publishing Owen Paterson's contract. If the member is just about to justify why he was not here for that debate, I look forward to hearing from him.
Talking of mass ranks, where are they all? Yeah. I saw on Twitter yesterday. I saw on Twitter yesterday a graphic which said Labour were back in business. I'm not too sure what business, but it's not the business of this House. Is it not the case, Madam Deputy Speaker? The reason why they're not here is because they've got no plan, no vision, and no credibility to run this country. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I regret the member seems terribly confused. I'm sorry about this. This is an SNP Opposition Day debate. And as I'll go on to explain, sadly, it is his government which lacks a plan, which lacks, in regard to this motion, the competence and indeed the credibility against corruption that is necessary. And if he could answer on those subjects, I would be very grateful, because he was not in the Chamber for that debate on those contracts. But he certainly did not speak. I suspect he was not willing to do so. Indeed, I must say, Madam Deputy Speaker, it seems easier for some to defend the indefensible, it seems, than to stand up for transparency, probity and the public interest. And all I can say is I really hope that those in charge of junior ministerial appointments are watching carefully for the sake of the members across the Chamber. Yes, of course.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. And my honourable friend is absolutely right that on this side of the House, we believe that the ministerial code should be followed and that ministers should be compelled to come to the House and tell the truth. And that if they don't tell the truth, they should be dealt with as the ministerial code states that it should. But unfortunately, they're led by the Prime Minister, who is chief liar in charge.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to my honourable friends. I will come on to that issue of the ministerial code because, of course, it is highly relevant, sadly, to this debate, given the appalling way in which it has been treated by the Conservative government. Indeed, the overall Conservative attitude that rules simply don't apply to this Prime Minister or his government is genuinely dragging our politics through the gutter. And I have to say, while I see that today's motion references the 6th principle of public life, honesty, I would have referenced also the other principles too: selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness and leadership, where unfortunately the current Prime Minister is falling short, where the Conservative government is failing to get a grip, and where working people in our country are paying the price. I'm happy to give way.
For giving way. She talks about honesty and integrity. Could you please confirm how many Labour MPs have ended up in the nick over the past 10 years?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, the major difference, as I will explain to the honourable member, between my party and his, is that wherever we see in the Labour Party rules being broken, inappropriate action, we act against it. We don't try to change the rules and try to stitch up the system for our friends. That's the major difference. Now, as I was reading before this debate, I came across quite a curious piece, which I'm sure many members on the benches opposite will have seen. The Prime Minister's foreword to the Ministerial Code. It commits the government to upholding, and I'm not making this up, the very highest standards of propriety. The principles of public life are lauded as precious things that must be honoured at all times. That, from a Prime Minister who tried to rip up the standard system to save one of his friends who was found to have engaged in an egregious case of paid advocacy by the Committee on Standards. The foreword also states there should be no bullying. That, from a Prime Minister who refused to sack his Home Secretary after an independent advisor on standards found she'd broken the Ministerial Code because her approach to staff had, and I quote, on occasions amounted to behaviour that can be described as bullying. It says there should be no harassment. That, from a Prime Minister who imposed a 3-line whip to keep one of his MPs in Parliament after he was found by an independent panel to have sexually harassed a member of staff. I'm happy to give way.
Grateful to Honourable Lady for giving way. I'm hoping she'll use this opportunity to apologise to my predecessor, Ruth Smith, for being the bullying and harassment she faced from Labour Party members simply for being Jewish.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I won't give way. Madam Deputy Speaker, I, of course, will respond to the member's comments because, just as I said to his friend one moment ago, where the Labour Party finds action that is inappropriate, we act. We have changed our systems. We have made sure that we comply with what is required of us. And if he wishes to defend his party happily allowing a member who has been found to have engaged in sexual harassment being back on their benches, that is up to him. It's his decision. Now, no, I won't. Within the foreword to that piece on standards, again, the Prime Minister says there should be no misuse of taxpayer money. That, from a Prime Minister who gave us the VIP lane for PPE contracts, £3.5 billion of taxpayers' money to party donors and Conservative cronies who were recommended by Conservative ministers, MPs and Downing Street officials. Contracts which so often failed to deliver while our nurses and care workers struggled and while many British firms' offers of help were passed over. Happily give way.
Is she really denigrating the efforts to get hold of PPE? And does she not also know the history, which is that the Labour Party also put forward proposals and Labour Party members and Labour donors also helped in that huge effort to get PPE?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm slightly surprised to hear the right honourable member wish to draw attention to what took place in this regard. No, because I will respond to his point. He said, was I aware that Labour MPs and others were making recommendations? I'm absolutely aware, because we were all trying to do that to ensure we had the best response. But the difference was they were not entered into that VIP lane, and one can see this in the list of firms which was recently published. So if he wants to state that amongst that list there were Labour MPs' names rather than those of his Conservative colleagues, he must have been looking at a very different list to me.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to set the record straight on this, and I hope that after I speak, she will withdraw these comments and the Labour Party will no longer use this argument. Because the contract with Excalibur Healthcare, which is run by a Labour donor, was introduced from a Labour MP through me. And the man, a very good man who runs Excalibur Healthcare, in fact, helped launch the Labour Party Science Manifesto in 2005. So now she can withdraw the allegations, and what she should say is a big thank you to everybody who helped get PPE when it was so badly needed.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I really regret that rather than taking responsibility, stating that the system will be changed for the future, instead we see an attempt ultimately to rewrite history. It's not myself stating that Conservative-related actors were more likely to obtain contracts. It's the National Audit Office which pointed this out. And yes, as I mentioned one moment ago, Labour figures were making recommendations to have a better response. But in doing so, we were focused on those who could genuinely aid our response. We were not focused on, for example, pub landlords, others who had no experience in this field before. I don't want to upset the House. I'm very happy to take another intervention if Madam Deputy Speaker doesn't mind.
Straight on one further, if I may set the record straight on one further point, because I've heard this point about this pub landlord, and I just want to tell her and the House and put it formally on the record, and after this, I hope the Labour Party will also stop this slur, that the man in question, the gentleman in question, never got nor applied for a contract from the government or the NHS at all. It is a fabrication pushed by the Labour Party. It's a load of rubbish. What was happening, though, was a huge range of people helping out in the national effort, including members of the Labour Party.
Madam Deputy Speaker, no, I won't give way, and I most certainly...
Order. We have had a perfectly reasonable exchange between the Right Honourable gentleman and the Right Honourable lady. We don't need to have shouting about it. We are dealing here in facts and good argument, not shouting. Annalise Dodds. Point of order, Don Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I just wonder if the government has lost every court case that it's been taken to court on in regards to procurement contracts and corruption, does that mean that the member opposite needs to apologise for what he's just said and withdraw?
No, that is not. That I appreciate what the honourable lady is saying. It's not a point of order. It is a point of debate, and perhaps she might like to address it later in the debate. Annalise Dodds.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And indeed, it is the case that facts have been laid out in courts of law. They stand for themselves. And I have to say that at a time when we see yet again our National Health Service, our care workers, volunteers up and down the country supporting that COVID effort, I think it's incredibly important this government is transparent. I will not withdraw what I have said, but I do hope that the Conservative government will withdraw what it has said about not being transparent, a point I will come onto in a moment. Now, finally, the foreword says, written by the Prime Minister, that there will be no actual or perceived conflicts of interest. But we know there have been so many, sadly. Peerages, apparently handed out to anyone who can meet that £3 million entrance charge and agree to a stint as Conservative Party Treasurer. David Cameron and Lex Greensill given the run of Whitehall to beg for access to hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' money. And over £500 million in testing contracts handed over to a company advised by a Conservative former minister without competition and behind closed doors, dishing out a second contract to Randox Laboratories after they'd failed to deliver on the first. And I'm grateful to the Right Honourable Member for those comments that he just made. If he believes in that transparency, I do hope he will be, and in fact, indeed, well, transparency reveals facts, does it not? Therefore, I hope he will be encouraging his government to do what indeed this House stated it must do only 2 weeks ago, which is publish the minutes from that meeting between Lord Bethell, Owen Paterson and Randox over the award of money-spinning contracts. Parliament decided this must happen 2 weeks ago. The Deputy Speaker reminded ministers to do so in a timely fashion last week, and yet they're still dragging their feet. They say that they can't possibly make them public for another 2 months. That seems like a rather long time to establish the facts, does it not? If those vital minutes simply don't exist, ministers should do the right thing and come clean about it now, here today, not pretend to spend the next 2 months looking for them. So I offer the minister opposite, and indeed those on his benches, the chance to do that right now. Let us know, do those minutes exist or not? Intervene and let me know whether they exist or not. Well, no one's meeting my gaze there, so it appears clear that we will have to wait until the end of January to know what is taking place with those minutes. Yes, happy to.
Grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way. I wasn't planning on speaking in this debate, but I wanted to draw. She's been talking about conflicts of interest and timely wait. And also she said earlier in her speech that when the Labour Party sees people breaking the rules, they act. I note that I have written to the Honourable Lady twice. I've written to the Leader of the Opposition on a number of occasions throughout the last few months relating to her former flatmate, Ruth George, who has an atrocious record when it comes to anti-Jewish racism. She's the one who, when Luciana Berger quit the Labour Party, came out and said that they were funded by Israel. Will she respond now to that conflict of interest and agree that she should not be in the Labour Party anymore?
The honourable gentleman should resume his seat. He should not be attacking personally in that way. Annelies.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And just for the record, as the member indeed stated in his own letter, those issues have been dealt with, have been taken up and proceeded. Well, he stated it in his own letter, so perhaps he needs to go back and reread it. Now, we cannot sit idly by, surely, and allow this situation around cronyism to continue. The current regime of standards and rules on the conduct of ministers relies too much on convention in these unconventional times. It gives the Prime Minister the power to act as judge and jury even when his own conduct is in question. And that's why my party, the Labour Party, has brought forward a 5-point plan to clean up our politics, to strengthen and uphold standards in public life, and to protect taxpayers' money from the egregious waste and mismanagement that we've seen during the pandemic. We'd start by banning second jobs for MPs, with only very limited exemptions, to make them focus on the day job, not the one on the side. We'll stop the revolving door between government and the companies that ministers are supposed to regulate, banning ministers from lobbying, advisory or portfolio-related jobs for at least 5 years after they've left office. We would stop Conservative plans to allow foreign money to flow into British politics and create strict rules to stop donations from shell companies. We'd end the waste and mismanagement of taxpayers' money with a new Office for Value for Money and reform of procurement. And we would establish a new, genuinely independent Integrity and Ethics Commission to sit across government with the power to investigate ministers, take decisions on sanctions for misconduct, and ban former ministers from any job linked to their former role for at least 5 years after they leave office. Happy.
I thank the lady for giving way, but I'm very confused on what she said, because I'm under the impression that 3 current front-bench parliamentarians in the House of Lords work for lobbying companies in the Labour Party. How can you claim what you say at the dispatch box, yet they're...
Just not refer to the honourable lady using the word you, because that's me. Okay? Alexander Stackpole.
I apologise, Madam Speaker. How can we talk about these aspects when current members of the Labour Party, the current Labour front bench, work for lobbying companies? This is just hypocrisy of the highest order.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I regret that the member is confused. We appear to have quite a lot of confusion this afternoon. Of course, Labour has set out those measures for MPs going forward, and we're very clear we would not stand back, as his party appears to be doing. We would take that action because we are determined to clean up politics for the future. Indeed, those measures are urgent and necessary because the current system relies on a Prime Minister who respects the rules and understands there must be consequences for breaking them. Now, Labour have set out those radical proposals for reform because it's so urgently needed. And when it comes to cleaning up crony contracts, we're insisting on transparency because we have to learn from the mistakes made by the Conservatives, not least during this crisis. And I'm afraid we've also got to learn from mistakes where they've been made by any party, including also the SNP. And here I regret that the honourable member for Ross Skye and Lochaber, for whom I have a huge amount of respect, wasn't more reflective on the actions of his own party. The SNP government had already been criticised for treating journalists and politicians differently in its responses to freedom of information requests. When the SNP's health secretary tried to have freedom of information requests suspended. Disturbingly, it's been revealed that an SNP cabinet minister then directly intervened to try to prevent the publication of statistics on care home deaths before the Holyrood elections. And the Financial Times newspaper has had to battle to force the SNP government to reveal the true cost, total cost of its guarantee to Sanjeev Gupta's businesses, which appears to be to the tune of over £500 million. Now, Labour believes that sunlight is the best disinfectant in Whitehall and in Holyrood. And rules are there for a reason, to regulate our Parliament and its elected representatives, to uphold standards in public life and to protect our institutions from the cancer of cronyism and corruption. As the Prime Minister has discovered in recent weeks, ripping up these rules is thankfully easier said than done. But while he fails to take action to strengthen the system, working families in our country continue to pay the price. And they've been paying the price in response to what the Minister tried to set out before. They've been paying the price with the longest squeeze on living standards in this country since Napoleonic times. They've been paying the price with rising fuel prices and no plan to tackle them, with life expectancy falling in many parts of our country and 5.5 million people on NHS waiting lists. And they're paying the price with rail in the north scaled back. They'll be paying even more of the price with the Conservatives' working class dementia tax as well. And the Minister tried to claim his government was delivering what the people of this country want. Well, they don't want the Conservatives picking their pockets, they don't want their incompetence on public services, and they don't want their sleaze, graft or corruption either. Thank you.
Matt Hancock.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I wish you also and the whole House a happy St Andrew's Day. And I've come to this debate today because it strikes me that the SNP motion today is pitiful politicking. And the people of Scotland, frankly, deserve better. And they want to see real solutions to real problems. And unfortunately, it's part of a pattern, Madam Deputy Speaker, with the SNP, that they put ideological purity ahead of the interests of the people of Scotland. And we've heard it, and we in fact heard it from their leader here on the front bench, who argued that independence wasn't the most important thing on the minds of the people of Scotland. But we know why they brought this debate today. It's merely so that they can find another way to make the argument for independence, which they lost so comprehensively when it was put to the people of Scotland 5 years ago. Now, today they call for censure of the Prime Minister. And what they should be doing is working to improve the lives of the people of Scotland. I think the flop of a speech from the front bench opposite demonstrated that they are losing this argument. He reads out a list of allegations that were comprehensively demolished by the Minister in his excellent speech. At the heart was that the Prime Minister is ignoring advice. The problem with the SNP is that they ignore not just the advice, but the decisions of the people of Scotland and this country in every referendum that they've seen. The problem is that they don't see a referendum result that they've liked, and so they ignore them and ask for a rematch. And on the substance of it, I won't go into their failures in education, for instance, where Scotland once had the finest education system in the world. He didn't even mention COVID-19 in his comments. I won't dwell on the huge economic costs of independence. But what I will say is this. There is one piece of evidence from the Prime Minister's tenure that demonstrates that what he has done completely undermines the SNP's case, and it's the vaccine programme. And I just want to mention it for a second. Because they're losing the argument on the substance, they focus instead on politicking. But conceived through a UK-funded scientific work involving researchers from universities across the UK, indeed the whole world, the Oxford vaccine was a UK success, is a UK success, and shows Britain at her best. Critically, we bought for the whole of the UK, so everybody across Scotland and the whole of the rest of the UK could get access to vaccines first in the world. But even better than that, it was a joint effort, because if you're Scottish and British and in this union, you get the best of both worlds. A UK vaccine delivered locally by the NHS in Scotland, working with local councils, where we could bring in the British Army when we needed reinforcements. It was a huge team effort. All 4 nations rolled out the vaccine together. And I would just pay tribute to my Scottish opposite number at the time, Jean Freeman. She deserves plaudits for putting pragmatism ahead of ideology. The only problems for Jean Freeman were when the First Minister of Scotland would get involved and cause all sorts of problems by trying to politic with the programme instead of delivering the programme. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, why do I, as an English MP, care about this? It's because our union brings together the best for Scotland and for the United Kingdom and for England and for my constituents too. We should get away from this politicking and concentrate on the things that really matter.
Stuart Hosey.
Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow the right honourable gentleman for West Suffolk. If he carries on reading out his briefing notes like that, he might get a job in government. There's an old adage in politics, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's not enough to simply win a vote, one needs to win an argument as well. This government, though, is rather different. It will use its majority to win votes, although sometimes it will try to avoid those votes, but it rarely puts in the effort to actually win an argument, other than by blunt force and soundbite. And this has led to a catalogue, not just now, a catalogue of nasty, unnecessary and deeply undesirable decisions, a whole procession of decision-making based on half-truths, anecdote and inaccuracy. Let's take the election bill, or more accurately, the voter suppression bill. Up to 3.5 million people may not have suitable ID, and the government's own pilots indicated around 325,000 people could be denied a vote in a GB election. The government have persuaded nobody of the necessity to do this, but are bashing on regardless. Consider the changes proposed to the... Of course I'll give way.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. He's talking about winning an argument and winning a vote. Is the 2014 Scottish referendum not an example where the SNP won neither, but despite that continues to bash on regardless, as he says?
I can say to the Honourable Lady, we're here. We didn't declare UDI. We haven't rushed into a second referendum. What we have done is won another mandate, and we will hold the referendum in line with the wishes of the people, because that's what democracy actually means. Let me, as I say, consider the changes proposed to the Electoral Commission. They will give this government unprecedented and unchecked power by allowing ministers to set the agenda and the purview of the Commission, enabling them to change which organisations and campaign activities are committed a year before an election. That is executive interference in the electoral process that we should be deeply concerned about. And on a related topic, we have a boundary review. It will reduce the number of MPs in Scotland and Wales. It will increase the number in England. And if every single vote was cast the same way, it wouldn't affect the SNP. The polls say we would still return 48 members. But in England, the Tories would go up and everyone else would go down. So it's no wonder, looking at the failure to tackle dark money, the boundary changes, the evisceration of the Electoral Commission, the voter suppression bill, that the public smell a rat. And then there's cash for honours. When my honourable friend from the Here and the Near asked the Prime Minister whether such practices should end, he seemed to defend it. And rather bizarrely, he said, until you get rid of a system by which the trades union barons, whoever they are, fund other parties, we have to go ahead. There's a world of difference between organisations coming together to campaign for things they believe in and selling honours for cash, which is illegal. And of course, the Tories always defend their own by trying to get Owen Paterson off the hook, conflating his issue with a general change to the standards process. That was never going to wash, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Yes, I will. Grateful for my honourable friend for giving way. He's talking about illegality. We should never forget that it's this Prime Minister's government that introduced the phrase into the lexicon, into this House of Commons, that it's okay to break the law as long as it's in a limited and specific way.
Limited and specific law-breaking is still law-breaking. I was also struck that they almost boasted about their intention to break international law, not in the little Britlander exceptionalism that we're used to, but in a way that would have made the UK an international pariah. I could also add, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government lost a key battle in the Tory COVID cronyism row when the NAO ordered it to name the VIP lane firms given public contracts. I could add the disgraceful but apparently use of WhatsApp and Signal messaging systems, which have options to make messages disappear, which it appears have been used to avoid scrutiny of decisions made during the COVID crisis. Or the fact that the High Court granted a judicial review into the rules regarding the retention of records. But my favourite, Madam Deputy Speaker, was when the Supreme Court ruled that the Prime Minister's advice to the Queen that Parliament should be prorogued for 5 weeks at the height of the Brexit crisis was unlawful. Defeats in the courts, judicial reviews, trying to get Owen Paterson off the hook, cash for honours, voter suppression, weakening the Electoral Commission, ignoring dark money, unlawful prorogation. This is a pattern of self-serving, self-seeking behaviour, an approach to governance which is grubby to say the least and smacks of dishonesty. The rot, no I won't, the rot starts at the top. The fish rots from the head down. That's the Prime Minister. The buck should stop with him, and the process to end this should end today with support for this resolution.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I wish you and all right honourable and honourable members of this House a very happy St Andrew's Day, by far and away the best saint in my humble opinion. But it hasn't been a very happy St Andrew's Day for many of my constituents, because as we sit here debating this today, thousands of my constituents remain without power, without lights, heating or internet connectivity as a result of Storm Arwen. Hundreds remain without water.
thousands more, but only I will give way on that point. Doesn't he think, Madam Deputy Speaker, that it would be a better use of time, frankly, to debate that rather than this mention?
I think I thank my right honourable friend for asking that question, because I do actually, and I'm actually quite angry that whilst constituents of mine, the SNP might heckle and make light of the fact that Scots are freezing in their homes, have no access to services at this time. But I am quite angry that we are here debating this when people in Finghan and Strawn and Kincardine and Neil and many other places in West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine are dealing with a catastrophe and a crisis, and it was not out with the realms of possibility for the right honourable member, the member for Roscoe Lochaber, to table a motion today. Maybe we could have debated how the Scottish and the UK governments might work together to support all those across the United Kingdom that have been affected by Storm Armin. But we're not. We're here debating this, and indeed, actually, as of early this afternoon, the First Minister of Scotland, Scotland's most prolific social media activist, it would seem, has yet to post any comment on, she may have now, but that was before I came into the chamber, on what I will not give way, because before I came into the chamber, she had not. The power went off on Friday. Today is Tuesday, and the First Minister of Scotland had not made one comment in relation to the fact that 72,000 Scots were without power over the weekend. The Prime Minister, I would like to thank my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, for last night expressing his concern and offering the Scottish Government any support that the UK Government could give to support my constituents and indeed constituents across the rest of Scotland. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, when the right honourable member for Roscoe Lochaber announced with his typical understated fashion at the weekend that this was going to be the motion that was being tabled today, he said that he was doing it to be the real opposition and hold the government and my right honourable friend to account for our disastrous actions. Well, I have to admire the brass neckery, if nothing else. One might suggest that if the SNP did not spend so much time playing politics down here at a time of crisis in Scotland, they might have noticed that at home in Scotland, they are supposed to be a real government. Yeah. For if we are going to talk about disastrous actions by government, and I just wish I had time to go into them all, let's look at the record of their party in government in Scotland over the last 14 years. Drug deaths, failure, 1,264 deaths in 2019. 15 times worse than Germany, 35 times worse than France, 3.5 times worse than the rest of the United Kingdom. Education, failure. Scotland and the SNP has fallen in the science rankings, in the reading rankings, in the maths rankings. We have the lowest scores in maths and science since PISA, since Scotland started participating in PISA 20 years ago. Literacy and numeracy rates declining, the attainment gap widening, and now you are more likely to go to university if you come from a deprived background in England than you are in Scotland. That is a shameful record. Scotland's NHS, 25% of GP practices have unfilled vacancies. 500 consultant posts vacant in Scotland's hospitals, and I could go on. In the northeast of Scotland, of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, not failure, just abandoned. North Sea oil workers told they have no future by the SNP's partner in government. The First Minister declaring there should be no more exploration in the North Sea and that Cambo is a bad idea. Reneging on their plan to drill the A96. Failure to deliver money for improved rail journey times that they promised twice in a manifesto, and a broadband rollout that is going to be 5 years late. Not so much disastrous SNP action, it's missing in action when it comes to the northeast of Scotland. And all of this, whilst over 50,000 Scots were without power at the weekend, many without water. Whilst the nation recovers from Storm Armin, whilst many people worry about this new strain of COVID, whilst businesses recover from the last 2 years, whilst teachers work hard to support those kids that have been left behind, whilst doctors and nurses slog away to deal with the backlog and support all of our constituents, whilst Police Scotland does more with less, whilst the oil and gas workers worry about their future, what does the SNP choose to do today? Point scoring, petty politics, and frankly, a stunt that is wasting all of our time. Little wonder the First Minister's popularity ratings are in free fall. Support for independence is on the decline, and independence now ranks as eighth in the priorities of the Scottish people. Today's motion is on the conduct of the right honourable member of Oxford and South Wales, my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister. I just wish I had any confidence in the conduct of the Scottish Government and how they're running my country.
Stephen Bonner, it's important.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. 2 weeks ago, I was standing in this spot speaking about how parliamentary time has been wasted as the Prime Minister wanted to save one of his own former corrupt MPs. And today we have the opportunity to stand here and consider why we should put up with this. We are living, and people are living outside in a society of staggering inequality. We have thousands relying on food banks with wages pitifully low and the cost of living extremely high. Yet we have a Prime Minister who oversees a consistent approach of raiding benefits, keeping wages low, increasing taxes for the working poor, yet rewarding big business and those with accumulated wealth while turning a blind eye to wealthy tax dodgers. A Prime Minister and his own agenda. A Prime Minister, a democracy denier, stood on a hill of sleaze. That's exactly why it is right that we have brought forward this motion today in the name of my honourable friend for Skye, Lochaber and Ross. The Prime Minister's government and his leadership have failed. From Brexit lies on buses to gleefully telling of handshaking with COVID patients lying stricken in hospital beds. Cash for honours, cash for contracts, text for tax breaks, cash for curtains. I'm trying to fit all this in. Handouts for wallpaper. Time and time again, we see who he really is. A natiform metaphor for corruption, collusion and institutional sleaze ingrained in this Tory party. We need always remember that those who do hide vast sums of money or hoard their wealth in offshore accounts aren't hiding it from the authorities. Oh no, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the UK they are the authority. The Prime Minister himself registered on his interest. His stay in a luxury Spanish villa has been provided free of charge by the family of Lord Goldsmith, by who, of course, mere coincidence, the Tories will claim, have been handed a peerage and a ministerial job after an electoral defeat. Yet at Cabinet questions last Thursday, the Minister had the temerity to claim, and I quote, that there is no link between Tory party donations and nominations to sit in that House of Lords. In the same session, in relation to the contributions or lack of the Tory Treasurer in the Lords, the Minister said it was about quality, not quantity. This is apparently our democracy in action. Well, let me make this clear. It is my opinion that there is nothing noble about the men and women who are sitting through there in that place. Nothing, and even less so when they buy their place in there and their ermine robe with...
The honourable gentleman should not be directly criticising members of the House of Lords, so I want him to readdress that in his speech. He must continue to do that. Move on to his next subject.
Just clarify, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm speaking about the whole House of Lords and not any individual within it. Anybody who has to buy an ermine robe with £3 million, anybody who has to buy an ermine robe with a £3 million backhander, I think that says it all. Where is the democracy in that? What happened to true and honest representation? Does anybody really, with any credibility, truly think that we get that from this Prime Minister? He may argue, as is his right, that to appoint members to the House of Lords, and in this excuse for democracy, indeed it is. But when will it start being convention to stand up for those in dire poverty? When will it be this place's convention to effectively tackle homelessness? When will it become convention of those places sitting over there that have to earn the place in merit based on the number of votes they receive, not the number of notes in their pockets? And I hope that this motion today is the first step in doing so.
Madam Deputy Speaker. At a time when we're dealing with the aftermath of an unexpected global pandemic, with a booster vaccine programme to deliver, and an economy to keep firmly in recovery, I really do find it astounding that the SNP have used their parliamentary time today not to further the interests of the Scottish people, but to play party politics with their base. The leader of the SNP in this place, the member for Ross, Skye and Lochaber, has exposed what his main priority is, which was getting a news headline for his party conference this weekend. And at a time when we have seen the emergence of a new COVID variant, all the tragedy that we saw last week, all the people who have been left without power after Storm Arwen, imagine this being your first choice for a debate. It is nothing but political theatre designed to further an obsession with independence. And all that they have achieved today, Madam Deputy Speaker, is exposing what the Scottish people already know, that the priorities of the SNP could not be further removed from the priorities of the Scottish people. If you take, just last week, YouGov published a poll which found that the 3 most common priorities for the Scottish people, and indeed these were in line with the priorities of the British people, were the COVID recovery, healthcare and the economy. Yet what did we see at the SNP's annual conference this week? The Right Honourable Member for Ross, Skye and Lochaber spoke for over 15 minutes. How many times did he mention the NHS? Not once. How many times did he mention failing standards in Scottish schools? Not once. Yet how many times did he mention independence? 7 times. And I noticed in his opening speech today, I think he made double digits. It's little surprise that the eye of the SNP tilted so firmly away from their own delivery of public services that under their leadership, schools have plummeted down the international league tables. A&E waiting times are near their worst level on record, and Scotland has the highest drug death rate in the whole of Europe. All of these issues are devolved to the Scottish Parliament and have been under the SNP stewardship for 14 years. Yet instead of focusing on these issues or the other important issues that we could be focusing on for the Scottish people, again, they are simply trying to drive us further apart from one another. And in fact, I will give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. I heard an opposition bench saying not true, but they didn't intervene on my friend, the member for West Aberdeenshire, Kinnacardine, and they're not intervening on her. Do they have any answer to the charge sheets that she is making?
I thank the honourable member for his point. But the point that I would want to make is this. We have seen during the pandemic, and I think actually members on the benches opposite will agree with me, we've seen the strength that our family of nations working together can achieve, from the procurement of vaccines through Kate Bingham's much lauded work with the Vaccine Task Force, the British Army deploying personnel to help with ambulance services and provide mobile testing units in all different nations, and of course, the full financial power of the UK Treasury, pooling and sharing all of our resources to stand shoulder to shoulder with the British people across all 4 nations to support their livelihoods through the UK furlough scheme. But let's briefly talk about the SNP's single issue, their single issue they focus on to the detriment of all others, dividing our family of nations. My parents were so pleased to have been welcomed to Britain when they moved here in the 1970s. Like many others, they viewed these islands as a shining city on a hill, a beacon of optimism and opportunity. And with a mum who still works for the NHS in England and a cousin who works for the NHS in Scotland, I know firsthand how the people of Britain are woven together. Our bond is more than constitutional. It's emotional. It is shared family ties. As we emerge from a very difficult couple of years, I think that is what we should be focusing on this place. Supporting the people of this country, supporting those families and dealing with their priorities, not the endless obsessions of the Scottish National Party.
Ellen Cassell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Member for East Surrey and commend her for reading her briefing notes so very well. She says that we in the SNP don't know the priorities of the Scottish people, and I gently remind her that the Tories don't win elections in Scotland. Over the course of the pandemic, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK's economy shrunk at the fastest rate for a century and unemployment rose to one of the highest rates. And at the exact same time, Britain created a record number of billionaires. And there are now 171 billionaires in this country. Whilst the rich were getting richer, the poor were getting poorer. And when this Tory government should have been lending a hand to the most vulnerable in society, on the opposite benches, some chose to line their own pockets and the pockets of their rich mates, and the Prime Minister did nothing. So let's be absolutely clear. The policies that this Tory government have introduced and continue to implement are none other than an attack on working class communities. My constituents of Airdrie and Shotts are in continual contact with me, Madam Deputy Speaker, outlining how Tory policies are impacting their day-to-day lives, and genuine concern has been raised that the Prime Minister simply does not understand the hardships that people face. I will give way in just 1 minute. Rather than looking after his mates, the Prime Minister should be listening to the public. And he's not here today, but I want to put it on record how the Prime Minister's policies are impacting my constituents. One wrote to me, and I'm going to make progress, one wrote to me and said, I'm a single woman that has learning difficulties. A £20 per week cut in my income would have a huge impact on me. I have struggled with my bills till the pandemic. The extra money has helped me out a lot. So the Minister is in his place, and I've got a few questions for him. How many people does the Prime Minister know that are on universal credit? And how many people does the Prime Minister know that that have donated money to the Conservative Party and subsequently joined the Lords? I'll quickly give way.
Honourable friends making a powerful speech, and the members obviously seem to forget what the subject matter is of this debate. Those people might want to watch Peter Stevanovic video that's got over 40 million views. That might help jog their memory. Sign my EDM 383 about the ministerial code, and also watch my Big Nasty performance where I did a little rap about the Prime Minister. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member for her intervention, and I highly encourage those on opposite benches to go and have a look. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have previously spoken in this very chamber on the Nolan principles, the principles of public life by which we are bound, and the Prime Minister's actions has potential to bring shame on this House. Scandal after scandal risks bringing this very House into disrepute, yet there has been no independent investigation to hold those responsible to account. And Madam Deputy Speaker, the deception and dishonesty of this old boys network is entrenched in government and the Lords, and I simply cannot comprehend that in the Scotland's office we have a government minister who in May this year was rejected by the Scottish electorate, but handed just months later a peerage in a government role. How is this democratic? Since it's not. Since the Prime Minister arrived at the dispatch box, he has created 96 peers in less than 2 years. So the unelected House of Lords is bigger than the elected House of Commons. I ask again, how is this democratic? The Prime Minister has frequently violated the sixth principle of public life. His attention instead should be on creating policies that help the most vulnerable in society. And that, no, I'm going to make progress, that starts by retaining the universal credit uplift and scrapping the two-child limit, along with scrapping the national insurance hike. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I conclude by stating this. The pandemic has worsened household finances, and so this UK Tory government needs sustainable and long-term solutions to prevent a generation of people failed.
Anthony Higginbotham.